Howdy, howdy. How are you guys doing today? Welcome back. Let's see here. Oh yeah, today I was wanting to start out by just maybe giving, I don't know, thought it'd be interesting to talk through why I've chosen kind of the visual aesthetic I have. Beyond the, I think it's kind of pretty personally. So I've been really trying to make it very visible, and credit the artists that I'm pulling from. Sorry, I just realized that's fine. Yeah. But sorry, I'm just pulling that up for. Sorry, I'm all over the place this morning. Lock in. So the visual work, kind of the visual aesthetic I'm using for this project. So again, I try to make it very readily, very prominent part of it, the crediting of it. But just if you haven't seen it, just to reiterate it. So all of the wallpapers that I'm using, I'm using them as the digital sense of the wallpaper, not that they're always the backdrop, but they're also literally wallpapers, in the real world. But they were designed by the artist William Morris, who's part of the Art Nouveau movement in the 19th century. I apologize. I maybe should have done a little bit more research into I could tell more about him, but I just like his work. But so I'm combining his wallpapers that he designed. And he's very, I find just very lush and geometric and again detailed and rich, visual pieces with either photographs that I've taken. Which, at the bottom of the screen right now, that's it's a photo I took on a walk one day. Or as is the case for the waiting screen or the the offline screen, and I'll be incorporating some more of his work. The stencils by the artist Buzz Blur. I do know a little bit more about his life. He is, in the daytime, he worked as a railway operator, as a railway man, just throughout the United States. But he had trained to become an artist. I'm pretty sure he got at least a bachelor's degree level education in it. And I'm fairly certain he's planning furthering his education, at graduate level, when the Vietnam War came. And in order to avoid being drafted for that, he married someone, who he had somewhat recently met, but, they decided to get married. But as the war progressed and they started drafting even married people, he decided to join his family's business, which is that they've been railway operators, generations back. And from there, he just stuck with that world. But, at his heart, he still loved art. And so somewhat soon after starting, I think it was in 1971, if I believe, he began to engage with the art scene that honestly wasn't that familiar with until I learned about Buzz Blur, which is, I believe it's monikers is the name for it. And I apologize to anyone who's more knowledgeable in these subjects, but But what the art movement is you basically, it's like, in his own words, you like intentionally like vandalize your own train, uh, with often just like chalk, right? So yeah, you can clean it easily, but you write on your own train, with like usually like a logo of yours, which is like your moniker, and his was. I want to make sure that I think it's like education enough to like claim for use, but so I'll just maybe just pull it up. Just might as well. So his moniker that he chose was the Colossus of Rhodes. That's embarrassing. And this is the image that he chose for himself, which he would put on the side of his railway cars. And there's the man himself. So there's Colossus of Rhodes. Then underneath it, he would put a segment of poetry, often from like different books that he read. And that's how he kind of really started, again, producing art for himself. Or not for him, that's how, one of the main ways he began producing art, embracing the randomness of that medium, in that, the art that he would send out, he didn't know where those trains would end up. And then trains that came in where he'd see other people's monikers, he didn't know where they had come from. And, he really, in interviews, he talks about that he really, that was very meaningful to him, the randomness of that. But he ended up entering into the mail art world, which is MAIL, like snail mail, that kind of a thing. Which he, in kind, I should actually just, this is I'll just pull up the interview that I'm pulling a lot of this from. Let's see, just to credit, the work that this person did. It's like Babylon Falling, something like that. Yep. Yeah. If you want to read more, this is an interview where I've learned a lot about him and his life. So I'm just kind of summarizing it, frankly. But again, just to kind of finish up some of the context. Again, this mail art is very, in kind, it's very specific art form where it's just between you and the person that you're sending the letter to. They send you a piece of art, you send them a piece of art. It's like very specific, right? Like very precise, and the audience is intended for. And he, again, really appreciated that contrast between those two different mediums he was working in. And it was while he was working with his mail art that he began to create his stencils. See if I can find. Let's see. This is no. I found a repository the other day, but I'll just maybe just pull them up. Okay, this is from the same interview, so I'll just have these up on screen. A big part of his mail art is that he would, he's also a photographer, is another thing that he kind of consistently did throughout his life. And so kind of combining those, he, I believe, if I'm understanding correctly, would receive photos from people that, he was in correspondence with through the mail. And then he would transform them into these stencils based on the photograph, which I believe that, again, he talks about here that he would then sometimes spray paint those stencils onto the sides of his cars. So it's kind of combining the two worlds. And then again, I'm fairly certain that what he would mail back this is what he'd mail back. So, the stencils that he created on those photos, as well as I believe the destination of the train that he stenciled onto. But for me, I kind of came at it backwards in that, not backwards, but I first found him just through his stencil work. There's a local band, Parallax, from Provo, who were operating in the early 2000s. And this is one of my favorite albums. I invite you to give it a listen. And just, clearly spoilers, that's Buzz Blur's. He made that stencil for this band. Unfortunately, tragically, the lead singer, Blake Donner, very tragically passed away, at a pretty early age. And so this band is has stayed very local to Utah, in the Utah scene. And so, but with that has come, at least for me, just genuinely a sense of a lot of closeness and meaning from engaging with their work. And through that, by extension, then some closeness and meaning with Buzz, as both of them, most art that I feel like I experience right now is kind of given to me, right? Through algorithms or recommendations from people I know. But both of these, first Parallax and then Buzz, are some of just they're a very small example of me seeking out art and finding it. And with it, finding these very human and tragic and hopeful stories just with these people. And so it's all to say, again, I hope this little rundown has been interesting, but it's all to say that my intent with combining Buzz's stencils, here I'll pull up, let's see, I'll pull up the stencil I composited for, let's see here. I won't pull up the offline, it's not confusing, but I'll pull up this. So that's a stencil that Buzz created called Surrealville Crossing Guard on the background of a wallpaper called Queen Anne by William Morris. And I'll pull up one more, just another favorite of mine. But so, again, beyond feeling that these are very, I feel pretty, I really, aesthetically enjoy compositing them. But the reason why I've decided to tie them with this project is because, so in the same way that, again, I find William Morris's work is very intricate, enriching, again, foundation. It's again almost, has a lot of patterns to it, has a lot of elegance, and yet then combining it with again the stencils from Buzz Blur or this personal photography of mine. I feel that they complement each other and enrich each other. That William Morris's work again add intricacy and vibrance and color, and again richness to the stencils and to the world around it. The photographs I've taken of the world, and in kind, the stencils and the photographs provide almost not William Morris's work in of itself has meaning and richness to it, but to me it adds more depth to the wallpapers as well by giving a subject to their background, almost giving a purpose to it. And in that same way, I feel it's very analogous for what the intent of this project is, which is, the analogy is I find William Morris's work, analogous to the mathematical foundation that I'm operating off of. The richness, I'm not one to say like math is just like, oh, it's like intrinsically gorgeous thing, but like there is genuinely to me like beauty and intrigue and richness to be found in just engaging with the math alone. And yet, to me, without having the subject and the attention and the foreground and the purpose of people and of the world, it's, to me, only has a beauty up to a certain point. Its beauty is limited in just pure isolation. Whereas introducing those subjects again to that background of math, the subjects of people, of the world, of helping people and helping the world become better, again, it gives the math purpose and richness and meaning and direction. And again, in kind, our study of the people in the world, in providing mathematical foundation and background to it, likewise enriches our understanding of those subjects and adds intricacy and beauty and depth to our understanding of again the focus of our research. And so again, I hope that was interesting, kind of going into again some of my personal relationship with these artists and my intent and using them in this work. And hopefully, now anytime you see this overlay or again other visual elements of this work, it can, as it reminds me, it can also remind you of the intent of this work, which is again to use math to help people. Right, it's the succinct tagline for what I want my life story to be. And so, yeah, again, I hope that was interesting. But with that, I believe we'll get back into where we left off yesterday. Just to recap, because again, I've learned, I want to do some quick recapping. So we are currently working to answer the question of, again, as in the bottom right, if requiring bilingualism in some proportion of U.S. civil service jobs would be worthwhile. In the first stream, we talked about, it's not the best research question in the world. It's not very operationalized, which means that we can't directly test it because we haven't really defined well what we mean, particularly by worthwhile. But it's a good starting point. And from there, our goal will be to refine it and to make it more precise, and again, to operationalize it so we can actually meaningfully test it. But so towards that end, before I started streaming the project, some baseline, just getting some basic data from the censuses. Is it Sensi? I don't know. I go censuses, even though it's a mouthful, of Canada versus the U.S. Because I intend to use Canada for, I'm keeping Canada open as an option to do some comparative analysis, in terms of again how prevalent French is in these different regions of the country versus how often the language requirement is placed on these civil service jobs for those regions. So again, just in the recapping, we went on kind of, unfortunately, a pretty big wild goose chase. Again, not as big as it could be, but a little bit of a wild goose chase with trying this top-down approach of, again, so we have the prevalence of these languages among the average person But then we need to pair that with, okay, in order to see what's the current state, right? Are there discrepancies between, the amount of people speaking the language and the amount that language is available to them when they, interface with civil service jobs. And so that second element of like how much the language is available to them, we need to somehow access data on, okay, how, again, what are the requirements, or how often, what are like the bilingualism rates among civil service workers. And so again, our original approach was like a top-down thing where we were trying to randomly sample from different like government job databases. But already a big problem we were encountering was like the scope was getting out of hand. But then the real kind of nail in the coffin was that, somewhat sillily, I didn't realize it earlier, but it matters a lot how much a given civil service job is actually interfacing with the public, right? Because a lot of the jobs that we're looking at, that we would have been looking at, if we just got the jobs straight from those databases, were things like IT specialists and like internal administrators and things like that, where, again, it's very internal jobs to organization, where it like doesn't super matter what language they speak for the average person, for the day-to-day person. There may be some small effects, of like making it more accessible for different members of the community to like work within the organization. But again, for the majority of society, they're not going to be interacting with those people. And to meaningfully categorize this job has X number of frequency of interactions with the public, or this one has Y frequency of interaction with the public, based only on job listings, I think would be pretty, is not a tractable problem. And so, especially on scale, at scale. And so we switched our approach last time to a bottom-up approach, where we are now considering, okay, can we instead perform construct, design, and then conduct a direct survey on, the organizations themselves? So sending a survey to, and part of our design we set up yesterday is we're considering sending it to some sort of management position at these different organizations we'd be sampling from. Because those people would have authority that I don't have as just an independent researcher. Those people would have authority such that if they choose to conduct the survey, then hopefully there's a greater likelihood that we'll get a robust sample from that organization. They can hopefully use but use some of their authority as an employer to help us get some better data from the employees of those organizations. And then as we went through and determined, okay, what data would we want? These are the questions we've decided that we would be asking. Just language ability, how well can this given employee speak the language? How often does that person interact with the public? Again, accessing the data that we couldn't for the top-down approach. As well as kind of pairing the two of like, how often do you use that language in your current position? And so that a lot of that was informed by, or again, some of our choices there were informed by this paper that we had found yesterday, addressing how to counteract potential bias from self-selection, which we would run into in a significant way due, again, to the fact that I'm an independent researcher. So self-selection is the fact that people can choose whether or not to take the survey. I don't have any way, any authority to, require people, everyone I send a survey to fill it out and to give me a response back. And that, again, can potentially introduce a lot of bias into our data. And so this paper, part of it is addressing how to account for that bias mathematically. And so one of the big things we kind of landed on, one of the big things we landed on is, this is the mathematical equation for where bias would be coming from self-selection, and then kind of break down the three different components in this numerator. And the one that's actually pertinent to us is this third element, which is that if you can basically design the survey such that you minimize any correlation between how likely someone is to respond to the survey, minimize the correlation between that likelihood of the response and the likelihood, the answers that you'd be getting from the surveys, then you can more confidently say that there won't be bias. And so that then falls to us to try to figure out how to minimize that. And so the main one that I could think through and figure out on my own is, particularly, for language ability and, with that also the frequency of language use, is that it will be very important to make sure the survey is available and, again, well translated in the target languages that we'll be sending, English, French for Canada, English, Spanish for US organizations. As if, if someone has a very high language ability, or they use, a language a lot in their interactions, again, particularly, the secondary languages of French and Spanish, respectively, there's a good chance it's because that might be the language they're most comfortable with, right? And so if the survey is not available to them in that language, there's a higher chance that they just won't respond to the survey, in which case then we've just made a correlation between people who have a very high language ability or use that language a lot and people not responding to the survey. So again, I couldn't think of, as I was thinking through, I couldn't think of potential correlations between someone's likelihood to respond to a survey and how often, the employee or the organization generally interacts with the public. Again, the one thought I had there is that, so again, we're like, okay, so if someone is not interacting with the public a lot, if an organization generally doesn't interact with the public a lot, it maybe means more desk work, and not for sure, right? There's definitely some, U.S. Corps of Engineers kind of a thing, government positions where you're not really interacting with the public, but you're also not, it's not desk work. But if it is desk work, that's causing you to not have a lot of interactions, would that mean that it'd be easier for you to fill out the survey, right? Or more likely for your boss to feel is worth your time? Maybe, I don't know. It doesn't, whereas if you're a DMV worker, where you're constantly interfacing with the public, you don't have time where you're just you just open up a memo, answer some questions. But I don't know. To me, that wasn't super strong of a correlation that I could see. But regardless, we're now learning about, how to minimize, how to actually assess if there is some bias in that, just in case if there is, right? Because I'm human and, I'm, very likely could be missing things. So thank you for bearing with me through that long recap. Again, I'm still trying to figure out, how to pace everything with this new skill. But all that said, let's pick up where we left off. So we had just left off with they just started introducing, okay, here's how you can counteract bias introduced through self-selection. And so, so one of the big tools, one of the big ideas that we can use to counteract this bias is this idea of introducing an auxiliary variable, which, again, I won't go through the whole thing again, but it's basically a little canary in the coal mine where we include within our survey questions where we know the distribution of answers to it. We know how people do, from the population we're sampling from, we know how people do respond to those usually, right? Those questions. It's already known what the answer is basically to those questions. So that we can compare if our sample has any kind of discrepancy between how people usually answer those questions and how our samples actually answer those questions. And if there is some meaningful discrepancy, then we can, we know, our sample is biased, but then we can also counteract that bias in a systematic way, so that the questions that we don't know the answers to already which for us, again, is this language ability, all that kind of, the questions I just listed out, we can know if, how to unbias, counteract any potential bias in those things that we don't know the answer to already, so we can have better results to the new information we're getting. Again, so that's the key idea. So we call, again, those canary in the coal mine kind of things, making that alert us to potential bias, auxiliary variables. And so as they go through, we either need to this post-stratification is the name for kind of a basic version of this where so post-stratification is like how you actually compute the weights to de-bias your data, but that kind of relies on the assumption that you do have a good auxiliary variable, right? That you do have some variable that you already know the answer to. And so for us, again, in our context and how we're trying to apply these ideas, we need to kind of look into that. I just don't know. Again, so our population is, U.S. civil service employees, in a very broad sense. And so I don't know how much research has been done on that group of people. And how robust that body of knowledge is. So that's something we will look into today to see if, are there good potential auxiliary variables, right? And if so, sweet. Great, we'll include those within our survey. If not, then this paper also discusses this other technique, or this kind of supplementary technique, which is a call, you send out something called a reference survey where, so part of the problem of, again, self-selection is that it really comes into play when as you increase scope, right? Because you have less resources and less time and attention you can devote to any given survey, which then allows for the person to choose more freely whether or not they fill out and respond to the survey. And so the idea is with the reference survey is that we devote more time and attention to a smaller population. And so, we take a much smaller sample, but with that much smaller sample, we guarantee that every person we send the survey to, that they do fully respond. And in that way, that smaller sample, there may be some more variance and uncertainty, but we can, if we design a survey well, we know that there will be absolutely no bias from selection bias, because we've guaranteed that everyone has filled out that survey. And then we take, again, then we take the results from that smaller sample, and that becomes a new benchmark that we can then compare an auxiliary variable to. Again, you'll have to kind of see how that would apply to us in our circumstance. And so I think I'm going to jump to that part of the paper right now and see how they introduce that idea and how they kind of build it, see if that's something that seems feasible for us to do as independent researchers. So let's see. So what I just meant with the reference sample. So the previous section showed that post-stratification can be an effective correction technique, provided they are available. Okay, but if they're not available, one might consider conducting a reference survey. So yeah, we just talked about. Data collection takes place with a mode different from the web. So this paper is specifically about like web surveys, which is not what I intend on conducting. So some of the things that they discuss aren't especially pertinent for us in our project, but again, there still is a lot that is pertinent. So computer-assisted telephone interviewing. Okay, yeah, we can maybe put a little flag in those and see if those are worthwhile techniques. If we can, those are viable techniques for us to conduct to potentially get a reference survey. But so let's keep on reading though. So under the assumption of no non-response or ignorable non-response, this reference survey will produce unbiased estimates. Again, it's just the idea that we just discussed, which is that, again, if we have, I see some people are joining, so I'll kind of refresh where we're at right now. So we are looking at how to mitigate bias introduced from self-selection of surveys. So again, you send out a survey, but someone has the choice of whether to respond or not. And so right now we're figuring out different methods to counteract that bias. And so, again, the key one is we kind of create a benchmark that we can compare against to see if a known question has any bias. So we include a question we know the answer to already, and if the answers we're getting don't align with the answer we already know, to put it in maybe not the simplest way, but if they don't align, then we know that our entire sample is biased. And so, okay. So under the assumption of no non-response or normal non-response, this reference survey will provide unbiased estimates of quantities that have also been measured. So, so again, this is like, okay, we use these techniques to create our own benchmark if they're not available. Okay, let's lock in. So unbiased estimates of the target variable can be computed. Substantial variance. Yeah, the question is now whether these estimates can be improved by combining the large sample size of the web surveys. Okay, so so this is now like how to that's cool. Yeah, so how to improve the results we're getting from this technique. So again, I'm just kind of repeating what they just said, but putting my own words, so the big problem with the reference survey is how small the sample size kind of is by design. Means that there's a lot of variance that we introduce to it, which again, that means there's a lot of uncertainty of, we can't say with much confidence that this little group we actually sampled from is representative of the entire population, because we only took a very small peek at the entire population, basically. But this is, they are discussing how to mitigate that variance. So let's see here. So to explore this, it is assumed that one qualitative auxiliary variable X is observed both in the web survey. This variable, sorry, I'm just checking if you can. Oh, yeah. Okay, I apologize if you can hear the yard work outside. again, there's not much I can do for that right now with my setup. So I really apologize. Let's see. So, okay. So the question is now whether estimates can be improved. Okay. To explore this is assumed that one qualitative auxiliary variable is observed in both, and this variable has strong correlation. Okay. So we're including, again, like a question, again, in both our reference survey and in the actual survey we want to conduct. And we've chosen that question such that the question has a known correlation with another one of the questions we're asking, right? So I'm trying to think of like an off the top of, off the dome example for us. Like, again, I mean, I guess we just have to kind of see, but like, I don't know, like off the top of the dome again, just this is not perfect, but like, and again, I doubt we would not do this because it might be a little privacy concern. Be like place of birth, like, or like country of origin would potentially have a strong correlation, would have a strong correlation with language ability, particularly if you're born in Latin America, versus the United States, there'd be a strong correlation. But again, that's not the best one in the world. It's not super replicable, but just as an example. So then we perform a post-stratification. Then a form of post-stratification can be applied where the strata means are estimated using web survey data. Okay, maybe we should go back and read the post-stratification because they're building off of that. Again, sometimes you can skip sections if you don't think they're particularly pertinent, but you can always go back. So post-stratification is a well-known, often used weighting method. To carry post-stratification, one or more qualitative auxiliary variable are needed. So we're only considering one for this purpose. The situation for more variables, okay, whatever, yeah. So suppose auxiliary variable having L categories. Okay. And so again, this is for qualitative research. You have to like quantize or categorize the responses that you would get as you can't exactly put numbers to how well can you speak a language. I mean, people have, but that is an example of categorization. And so, okay, so it divides the target population to L strata. So, people fitting into different categories we've set up. So again, for us, like, how well do you speak a given language? Maybe rank it 0 to 5, or 1 to 5, whatever. And so, 1 to 5, we'd have 5 different categories. The strata subsets are denoted by, so we just split up our population to these different groups that we're giving their different names. Woo, hello. No, thank you. The number of target population elements is done, okay, so it's all notation. Okay. Suppose a simple random sample of size n, so denotes the number of sample elements. Okay, yep, it's all notation. Values of nh are the result of a random selection process. Yeah, okay. Since the sample is selected from the internet population. Yep. Okay, so here's the actual thing. So post-stratification assigns identical adjustment weights to all elements in the same stratum. Okay, so we weight. So again, within the stratum, we take the known proportion of Okay, I mean, that checks out. So we take the known proportion of the population, which is that big N on top, and divide it by the proportion that we got in our actual sample. Again, per strata, per group, where we're working with. Okay, so that's how we're weighting it. And then we just include those weights in our sample mean. Okay, I think it's pretty straightforward from there. So substituting the weights, working out the expression, leads to post-stratification estimator. Yeah, okay. Let's see here. Again, I really apologize for the yard work noises. Let's see. Expected value of this post-stratification estimator. Mean of the target variable. I think that's just a typo that they're using the tilde, or they're like defining it to be this, I guess, this tilde. So just like a weighted mean. Okay, I don't know. This is not the most interesting thing in the world. Generally, this mean will not be equal to the actual mean. The bias of the estimator is equal to, again, we just subtract it from the actual mean. Cool. Number of elements in stratum H of the non-internet population. Okay, wait, so let's see here. Population size. Okay, again, I'm just trying to see how this like translates into what we're working with. Again, so I think they're assuming, again, the internet population is like the sample that they're pulling from, and then N is, again, the whole actual population they're trying to study. And so I don't know how you are quantifying this then. So this NIH, I don't know. So again, that's like the number of elements in your group of people that's not in your sample, the population you're sampling from. That seems weird to include, but let's see. Bias will be there if there is, on average, no difference between elements with and without and within the strata. Okay, again, I'm just trying to see if this is actually pertinent to us or if it's really specific to this web survey. This is the case. There's a strong relationship between the target variable and stratification. So no difference between elements with and without internet. Again, I think this might be kind of specific under coverage, which, again, hopefully wouldn't be, like, I think we can avoid pretty, if we design our survey well, or, design our study well. The conclusion is that application of post-stratification will successfully reduce the bias of the estimator if proper auxiliary variables can be found. Okay. So reduce the bias. The target variable and the stratification variable. Okay, I think this is actually important to understand. So let's engage the brain. So let's see, the bias will be small. Okay, because, so it's mostly we're just relying on this term. If these are close to each other, they're really similar, then, again, we get 0, or this approximately equals 0, and so our bias becomes small. And so we're trying to figure out how we can assume or design our study such that the average person within our study and the average person that we excluded from our study have similar responses, which is interesting. But so this is the case if there's a strong relationship between the target variable and the stratification variable. So I guess it's just like, it's the idea that like if there's a strong enough correlation between what we're looking at and how people are stratified, that because it's such a strong correlation, like irons out any discrepancies between, like we like are super confident that whether or not you were in our study, you would have, we were confident what your answer would be anyways, I guess is the idea there. Yeah, okay, I'll take that as what they mean by that. The variation in the values of y manifests itself between strata, so between strata but not within strata. So in other words, the strata are homogeneous. Okay, so okay, yeah, again, that's like, again, like the ideal assumption is that like whether or not you're in our study, if we know what strata you're in, again, what category of, response, again, like for us, what your language ability is, then we know with absolute certainty some other response that you're going to give, right? Which again, like that's the ideal. I don't think it's possible, or whatever. It's the ideal. I imagine we don't have to have this perfect, exactly fully homogeneous thing, but just strong correlation. That's what we're working towards. So non-response correction terminology decision comes down to missing at random. Ooh, it's fun. The strata are homogeneous with the target variable. Okay, yeah, maybe they're just tying that to larger literature. I'm not familiar with that. But the conclusion is that application of post-stratification will successfully reduce the bias if proper auxiliary variables can be found. So, okay, these are the properties we need auxiliary variables to satisfy. So, okay, they have to be measured in the survey. Cool. The population distribution must be known. Okay, and they must be strongly correlated with all target variables. Oh, okay. Okay, maybe we'll get into it, because what they mean by strongly correlated with all target variables, again, like getting to the math of it, like there's a very big difference between correlated individually with each target variable, so it has like a strong correlation with just this one variable, strong correlation, this one variable, strong correlation, this one variable, versus strong correlation with the variables taken on aggregate. Like those are very different ideas. And then also that also goes backwards of like, if we have multiple auxiliary variables, do they need to each be correlated strongly, or do we just need to make sure we have coverage? But like it's like like these are strongly correlated with we have an auxiliary variable that at least each of our target variables has at least one auxiliary variable that is strongly correlated with, but they don't need to be correlated with the other ones. Again, those are just questions I have, and so hopefully, as we keep reading, we'll see. Those will be clarified. But okay, so it can be shown that in general, the variance of post-stratification estimator is equal to this. Shows that in the case of simple random sampling, I think this expression is equal to this guy. So the strata are homogeneous with respect to y. The variance of the estimator will be small. So okay, so the strata are homogeneous with respect to y. my tone of voice is different when I actually read something that I find like, oh wait, hang on, I actually need to care about this for our project. Let's see here. So okay, but yes, yeah, that's again a lot of this is just very intuitive. So again, if there's not variance within our strata, then the variance will be small of our estimator. Cool. case of a simple random sample from the internet population, the variance estimator is this guy. Okay. There's only simple, straightforward weighting technique. More advanced techniques are described in these papers. Okay. Do they address? Oh. Okay. Well, I'm not too pleased with how that concluded, but maybe later on in the paper they'll address. But again, to me, that they didn't well define what they mean by this property, that they must be strongly correlated with all target variables. And also they say, unfortunately, they're not available, and then they just kind of move on. So I don't know, maybe we can read these other papers, or maybe we can find another, like a different kind of thread to follow. But I don't know, we'll finish up. So again, because we jumped back up there once they started introducing, or you start talking about referencing that previous section, the one that we were actually interested in. So again, this is for, we create our own reference sample. Okay, so this is analogous to, again, like after we've weighted our samples. In the previous section, this is the analogous thing for, now we're doing that instead with a reference survey instead of a known population distribution. So the relative sample size for the reference sample. Relative sample size. Okay, yeah. So just how many of the people fell in that category. Cool. The reference sample. Okay, again, it's not the most mind-blowing thing in the world. So, population distribution, the web survey, and the probability distribution for the reference survey. Okay, so for, again, it's like this I is like, okay, we're actually taking the large sample. Jeez. And P is the sample we got from for our smaller survey. So let's see. Expected value of our estimator for our reference survey is the expected value, and this notation is not great, but the expected value what do I mean by that? Expected value of to this probability distribution. So you're treating this first as a variable that follows this distribution. Again, I just hadn't seen that notation before, but I don't know if much matters. The expected value of the estimator is identical to that, the post-stratification estimator. The bias is equal to this. It's super similar to what we saw before. Strong relationship between target variable and observed variable used for computing the weights. Yeah, okay. This implies that if the stratum means for the internet population, the target population do not differ that much. Yes. So using a reference survey with the proper auxiliary variable can substantially reduce the bias of web survey estimates. Cool. Note that the expression for the bias, yeah, it's the same. Is that any variable? Yeah, okay. For example, so again, I don't know, this isn't adding too much to my understanding so far. People in the same groups have more or less same level. people in the same groups have more or less the same level of motivation and interest to participate in such surveys. Effective weighting variables approach. What? Okay. So if we weight it, it's in the good situation. This implies that within weighting, there's no relationship between participating web survey. Okay, so like within the different categories, again, this feels like an assumption they're making. Let's see if we can justify that. But so what the assumption they're making, or what they're saying at least, is that, again, okay, well, if you're in the same group, so which again is like you're responding the same way to one of our questions, then we assume that people who responded the same way to that question will then be likely to respond overall to the survey. You have a similar likelihood of responding to the survey, which, like, maybe, like, if you have like very like a high resolution of strata, or like multiple intersecting categories, maybe. But I mean, I guess like the basic idea that you're probably reducing variance in the likelihood someone responds to the survey, I feel like that bears out. Like, okay, you're like in some way grouping people together by some common similarity, which makes sense that then that would then reduce the variance to some degree. But to say it's like, I don't know. So, okay, we'll just think that's what they mean by that. This implies that there's no relationship between participating websites. That just feels like a strong conclusion. Like, there's no relationship. And there's like less relationship, but I don't know. I guess that's the assumption you make. I don't know. It doesn't feel very robust. Let's see what they do with that assumption, though. So if a reference surveys use the variance of the estimator that we're constructing, so this guy, for its variance will be of the order 1 over n. So this means the first term of the variance will be 1 over m times n. First term of the variance of the post-stratification estimator. Okay, so just okay, so there's, okay, I was missing that. So this variance, okay, they're just getting like a general order, so for how it decreases. Okay. Since n will generally be much smaller than m in practical situations, okay, where are they defining n and m? Yes, m is our reference survey sample size, and n is our like actual survey samples. Okay, this first term of the variance will dominate. That is, the small size of the reference survey will determine the accuracy of the estimates. Okay, so because m is going to be small, and this is the only term that excludes n. Basically, these terms are going to vanish in practical terms because n is going to be so much larger, and this term will be the only one that's like actually meaningfully contributing to the variance of our estimator. which this is just the like weighted variance for our larger sample, which let's see if that's what they conclude. So that is the small size of the reference survey will determine the accuracy of the estimates. So the large number of observations in the web survey does not help to produce precise estimates. I guess because you're still multiplying by 1 over m. Saying that that's kind of the limiting variable. We don't really care about what's in here for some reason, I guess. So the large number of observations in the web survey does not help to produce precise. Okay, yeah. So again, the limiting thing is we need to. So one could say that the reference survey approach reduces the biased estimates at the cost of higher variance. Okay. Okay, sure. So, and then, but also just like a note that like the way to control that increased variance is by increasing your reference survey size, which makes sense. Again, this is all pretty intuitive, I feel, at the end of the day, but let's see, let's go back to like what there is to see if this 3.4 is pertinent to us. Improving estimates by also sampling the non-internet population. Okay, I don't know if that is useful to us because I think there's like internet, non-internet dichotomy that they're setting up. That's more specifically for their under coverage that they're exploring. For non-internet, like people who cannot access the survey. No matter how you design the survey, no matter where you send it out. Which again, I don't think it's like an inevitable part of our design. Okay. All right. So what do we want to do with this? What we just worked with? Where do we want to go from here? Again, I don't know. It feels like we didn't learn that much by diving into the rest of it. Again, it all was like pretty, I don't know, self-explanatory, honestly. And like the parts that weren't, I didn't actually dive into. Okay, yeah, I'm just gonna take a beat to again kind of just kind of think through what we need to do, like how to actually use our time and to, make progress and not just kind of putter around in where we're currently at. Okay. So our goal right now, we're trying to build towards, seeing if the survey is going to work, if it's going to be a good idea. And if so, and again, like it's part of that trying to like say, okay, like how can we make it as good as possible? And seeing if, once we make it as good as possible, if we feel like that will give us the data that we need in order to answer a question. So with our current setup, okay, so from what, I guess something we can take from what we just read, we just spent time doing, is we can also introduce auxiliary variables and then perform those techniques. Again, like that paper honestly wasn't that helpful in like how do you actually do it, right? Like, you know what they mean by all target variables, like I don't know. It really feels like, I guess intuitively, like you can, like you just need like an auxiliary variable for, again, at least, you know, each one of them has at least one auxiliary variable they're related to. But like you don't need one for all of them because like I'm pretty sure you can. So let's see here. What would that mean if you could just treat them separately from, you know, like the responses separately from each other? I guess that means that you're assuming they're like uncorrelated, which isn't true. But is that actually a necessary assumption to treat them separately? I don't know. I mean, it's like kind of chicken or not chicken. It's like, I think it's fine either way. Because either if they are uncorrelated, then okay, then you just pick. So, you know, the ones that like maybe the least correlated are the frequency of interaction with the public and the other two. But I think they're all like correlated with each other for sure. You know, again, like I'm just thinking like in America, like again, if someone has a like really high Spanish ability, and again, especially if they have like a low English ability and like a high Spanish ability, then they might interact with the public slightly less, depending on such the organization they're in. Maybe I could see that being the case. Yeah. Sorry, I'm just having thoughts. I just speak them out loud for the sake of, you this project. So, I just want to also make sure, like, again, not losing my train of thought in the end. But so just the other thought I had is like, again, what operationalizing this everyone, because I was thinking like, again, just anecdotally from my experience, like a lot of people who, speak Spanish primarily, or, like immigrants, and, like second generation immigrants have a higher representation in things like, sanitation work, those kind of positions. And so do we include them as part of who we're asking to take the survey? Like sanitation workers for these organizations. Because again, what do we actually want to do with the data? Really what we want at the end of the day, like, I think, so thinking about, again, what would we do, or what are we planning to do once we have this data? I think, honestly, this question we're including of like the frequency of interaction with the public, like, I think we're going to be using that to more filter out responses that aren't actually relevant to what we care about, right? That's the intent of that question. And so when we talk about, we ask them to like survey everyone and get everyone's responses, again, not in the sense that like people who don't interact with the public a lot aren't everyone, obviously, but like for our purposes, for what we want our survey to do, we really just need to make sure that they get, for sure, everyone who's like interacting a lot with the public, but so like, again, sanitation workers, as this example we're thinking of, like they, again, for the purpose of our study, for what we're interested in, I don't think we would need to ask that they're included, because again, I imagine they're not interfacing in this really like crucial way. As long as they can communicate internally within their organization, that's the amount of language ability that they need to perform their jobs. Let's see here. So, okay. So that's that little side thought addressed. So I'll mark it down so remember. Really only need to ensure responses from everyone who interfaces substantially with the public. Let me get a note, like frequency of interactions is ultimately meant to filter out non-pertinent pertinent. This is just a long note to myself, but it's fine. Responses. Again, for our study, like we don't need to have this. Yeah, like we don't need to artificially construct this like perfect, beautiful, super 100% complete data set of like every single person. So it's not, again, like it's not necessary for our study, and then again, like that's not feasible for me to do. And even though it might be nice for other people, like I don't think that is, a good use of that's not what I'm, whatever. It's like, it's a little square peg in a round hole kind of a thing of trying to build that into our survey. So into our study design. Okay. Okay. So coming back again to this idea of, are these correlated with each other? And again, I want to say for sure yes to these, obviously. Like obviously 100% those are correlated. Trying to think if these two would be correlated with each other. Frequency of interaction with the public and frequency of language use. So again, like, I mean, maybe, I don't know, this is maybe just like an obvious thing for just how you operate in the world, but I'll maybe just put a little lampshade on it, or that's not the word, hang a lantern on it. That's hang a lantern on it. I mean, this is just this thing I've been doing all stream of coming up with examples, right? Like to test out if you're understanding a really abstract idea correctly, right? So like, when I was reading that paper, I was regularly trying to produce examples for myself to see like, okay, how is this manifesting? How is it actually, again, what does this look like in practice? And then now, right, for are these two things correlated? I'm trying to come up with examples. Okay, like constructing a person in my head who might lead to correlation or demonstrate there is no correlation. Again, I don't know. Like, I think for different topics, just my experience as a math tutor, definitely for some things that's like very natural for people to do, but For some more abstract ideas, like as you usually get more and more mathematical, becomes like less intuitive to do. So anyways, I don't know, I'll just put it out there that at least I find that extremely useful to like understand abstract ideas, is like come up with examples for yourself. Anyways, getting back into it. So frequency of interactions with the public, frequency of language use and composition. So if someone is using, again, the one I kind of keep coming back to is someone like uses Spanish a lot, but not English a lot. Is there some correlation between those people, or, like how much those people, or, would those people have some reason to interact with the public more or less than the average person? And I guess, yeah, like, yeah. Because my mind is like, oh, like, again, we're not going to be including everyone, but like, if, again, theoretically, again, the thing is like, we don't need to include everyone, but, everyone could be included kind of thing. We'll just be focusing on, but, like, because there is some gray area, right, that we need to account for. And so again, just for my example brain, it's useful to think example, but while I'm thinking these examples, it's useful to kind of think of the extreme cases, right? And so even though we probably won't be including these extreme cases, they're still illustrative of the idea. And so again, if we were to ask a sanitation worker at an organization, again, I think there is a correlation, like they would be more likely to speak Spanish primarily because, again, just from anecdotally, but, other, Latino people are more likely to be your coworkers as well. And so, you can communicate with them in the language you're more comfortable with, Spanish. And so again, those people, the frequency of language use, again, high Spanish, low interactions with the public, and those are like correlated with each other. And that, and again, I think that correlation would persist, as we kind of scale between those two extremes, right? So like, Spanish versus English and frequency of interaction. It's not like one correlation, but I think they would be correlated. So it's all to say, though, that I'm pretty sure all of these are correlated with each other then. Which means that I think that if we just come up with a variable that's like for sure correlated with like one of them, by extension, it will also be correlated with the other two. Because then, these are all, they're all correlated, but that's, correlated is correlated already. Anyways, these ones are already correlated with each other. And so throwing in another thing that's correlated with, it's like a link in a chain, right? Since these are already like in somewhat lockstep, if we then put something that's lockstep with here, then it's lockstep with the whole thing. Hopefully my flapping is helpful and illustrative, or at least entertaining. Okay, so what would be a good auxiliary variable then? That's really strongly correlated with at least one of these. And again, this might be then where, so we know that, okay, looking for, I'll keep that bold, like looking for something strongly correlated with at least one question. And then from here, now I think is when we'll go into actually like, okay, let's see if we can find studies on that have been conducted on civil service workers in kind of a broad sense. Because again, I think, again, this is also where we have to like really be careful with like, like what is the target population? We have to really be explicit in that as well, so that we make sure that we are actually sampling the target population, and these results we find are actually pertinent to us and what we want to learn and like who we want to learn about. Because if we like find some results that are about like a very like a specific subsect of civil service workers, when we want to know about the whole thing, there's no guarantee that those results would scale up. And then likewise, if our scale is like smaller than what studies we find or we would look at, then ours might actually be biased in a way. And they might not line up, kind of a thing. So we just have to kind of choose as well for us what we want our target population to be. What will give us the best data, help us answer the question. And so for that, again, we'll set as a goal something, and then maybe if as we're getting out there, we see if other researchers, have conducted studies and they seem to have actually constructed a better way to define the target population, that actually, that definition of how they define the target population would be useful to us, then we can kind of adopt theirs and make sure our design, our survey, our study actually matches that new target we defined. But just for now, to have like an idea. Again, if we can swing it like just like all, again, okay, I have to think about scope. So broad stroke, first idea, maybe not best idea, but all federal, state, provincial, and municipal government agencies in US and Canada. Okay. Again, that's like broad stroke. How practical would that be? I mean, random sample from these organizations, right? And again, these are like super broad strokes, like, because we have to think, okay, there's like, in just terms of raw numbers, there's more municipal agencies than there are state, and there's more state than federal. Like, I think broadly, like, just gut, like, I feel like that's a reasonable assumption to make. And so do we sample? I mean, it doesn't super matter, I guess, as long as we, I think this idea of like stratification kind of idea, like a kind of meta stratification to it, that, I mean, we can take on an aggregate at the end and figure out how to like combine them, but aggregate our results. But again, like, if we want to just like, oh, okay, we'll just look at how much of a problem is it for federal positions, how much of a problem for state positions, like by state, how much is the problem for municipal positions? Let's see. Again, municipal stuff is where it gets tricky because the scale of it is just so large that, and the variance is so high as well between different cities. let's see, because, federal, okay, cool. Like we can say something meaningful about like the federal government, about the whole, how the federal government's doing it. States, again, like if we want, we could further stratify it so that we can say something with confidence about like each state. If we send out enough surveys to state organizations, and again, that reduces. So the thing I'm thinking through, I should just maybe put it, in simple English, or at least say it out loud, state it, is, again, this simple random sampling, like, so basically we're just trying to like kind of pre-account. So basically like by stratifying, by like categorizing, okay, we're actually only going to be we're only be comparing apples to apples, basically, right? Which is say like federal agencies to federal agencies, state agencies, municipal to municipal. And like, again, further stratifying, like same state to same state, same state to same state, right? The thought, again, kind of the mathematical thought there is we kind of like pre-account for differences between those different categories, those different regions, and thereby we minimize the variance we'd be seeing. Because if we just like, again, we just get like a full list of like literally every single registered government agency at whatever level and just like randomly draw from that, like, again, we'll get like, there'll just be like this like assorted jelly beans Costco sized bin of just like random agencies, where you just have just there's a ton of differences in between what those agencies are doing, who they're helping, who they're serving, the people, the requirements, like what they're doing. Like, there's like so much difference between those different, subjects, those different data points, basically, in the mathematical sense. And so, but again, you have to kind of balance, okay, like, but what is nice is that, like, unlike the top-down approach, you don't have to actually, like, for sure get everything, in order to, like, again, the top-down approach, like, in order to start accessing municipal things, again, that, like, it just required a lot more time. And, like, you had to, like, stratify to the cities, and, you had to be as precise as you can be. Whereas for us, the nice thing about, the spot-on approach and, like, then statistics is it gives us some leeway. Again, so it's all, like, very broad view, but it gives some leeway to not have to have, like, as just perfect resolution to our sample, just, and allows us to quantify, okay, here's the cost for us not being as precise as, possible. That's like the basic idea of statistics generally, right? It basically lets you still do things with, blurry data almost, right? It's a perfect picture. So that's to say, again, we can look into this, and so I haven't heard back yet from any sociologists that I've reached out to, but when they get back, or again, if hopefully I'll be able to talk with one of them, pretty good, because I have a sociology minor, so I've actually taken classes from some of them. So unlike the economists I reached out to, which are just fully cold emailing, cold call, I don't know if that translates to email, but again, hopefully the sociologist will work out to talk through with at least one of them. And I think this might also be a good part to talk through. So maybe I'll put like a little double asterisk and then just make a note to myself at the bottom of like ask a sociologist. But for now, we will maybe I'll put like up here, but for now, no, thank you. Great. For now, okay. What I'm thinking, yeah, I've thought enough, and we'll just kind of keep going. But for now, what I'm thinking is we'd like stratify by federal, so like all the federals are grouped together. Each state, it's like fed organizations are grouped together. I don't know, this just parentheses like grouped together. State organization by state, and then the where I'm going to allow for some blurriness is municipal organization, but just by state instead of, again, by like each city in the country. So by this, I'm like meaning, just again for myself, but just meaning that we just group together all of the municipal organizations for a state, and then we just draw a sample from that list. So again, that's going to introduce more variance because different cities have different needs, and different people and everything. But I think that's a worthwhile trade-off for the reduction in scope. Because again, this is already going to be pretty hefty, but not as hefty as having to build a bespoke piece of code for all these different websites. Like, this will just be hefty in just, I have to send a lot of emails, which is fine. So that's my current thought. Okay. And so that is my thoughts on like our target population. So we'll just kind of see if what data is available for these different, if there's like overall data, and if not, then we can start to try to stratify a bit in like our parameters of like, okay, is there data for only federal civil positions, for civil positions for this state, right? For municipal positions for this state, like, although, so at that point, so again, like, yeah, okay. Okay. So again, what I'm thinking, just thinking through, saying out loud what I'm thinking. So with this is federal. So I think if we choose to stratify this way, I think we like need auxiliary variables we choose to also be stratified. Because I don't think, again, just like thinking in practical terms, like if we do find a paper, it's like, here's all of the civil service jobs in the country, like here's properties about them. If we then want to apply those results to our stratified samples, I don't think that's a fair thing to do, because that's like not like a good thing to do, because like the different strata, the reason why we're stratifying is because they have different properties to them, and the aggregate, any aggregate results that we get from all of them, I don't think there's no way to tease out, oh, well, this is how, the federal organizations, this is the properties of the federal organization from this aggregate and states, right? Like, it's like lost in the aggregation. Which means that we would need to find population data for each of these strata, and that is a scope problem, because this means this is 2 federal organizations plus 50 states, 10 provinces in Canada. I want to say around there, at least. I apologize. Plus, and then, we can consider also like the territories of Canada and territories of the US, like Puerto Rico. But, just rough numbers. I'll just, tilde. And then municipal, again, another 50 and 10, which is like 122. So again, that's not a lot of, well, and then, so it's 122 strata. And so again, then we have to, so that's not a lot to like pull random samples from. And then, if we have a sample size of like, again, just like broad, rough numbers, like 50 or 100 from the strata, again, I feel like that's covering a good chunk of we'll have to kind of see how many organizations there are, because we also don't want to oversample, but which I also need to look into. I don't know how to quantify oversampling, so we'll need to look into that. But anyways, say like 50 or 100 at most, right? I mean, for municipal, it'll be different, but again, it's like 1,000 lower bound, upper bound, like 10,000 organizations. So again, that's like doable by automation, via email, right? But to find 122 papers that meaningfully give a population distribution for each of these things, and then altering the survey to match whatever variables we do or don't find, like that is not feasible. And again, like especially if you get to like municipal level, like I feel like that would also, there might just be holes in our data at that point, in which case we'd have to resort to what I'm thinking of doing anyways to account for the scope problem, which is we just do reference surveying. Let's see. To avoid having to find 122 population distributions, because then one, again, we can just standardize the questions we're asking, because again, I think regardless of, so I think, imagine these different organizations, I don't think there's any way to assume that these different strata we're defining would have the same target variable, that they'd give the same answers in the same proportions across the different strata. I don't think there's any way to assume that, again, because they have these different needs, these different scales, different scopes of the people they're helping. But within, sorry, what was this train of thought there? But within each strata, I think we can still safely assume that these will all still be correlated, regardless of which strata they are falling into, right? The person giving the survey, whichever strata they are in. I should probably use category again. Stratas from the paper, but it's a little, I don't know. To me, if you can use common words to describe abstract ideas, you should do that instead of making more. So these different categories, right, that we're talking about. again, I think any person within a category, for sure, these will still be correlated. And I think any reference question we introduce, therefore, that is correlated to one of them within a given category of organization will be correlated to all of them. So again, like I don't think we have to worry about coming up with new auxiliary variables for each category of organization. And but on the flip side, we also don't have to worry about finding good data for each category already. Like that comes packaged in with the design. Okay. So it seems like, again, we need to, I'm just bolding the kind of key design elements just to make it a little bit more readable. Just so I don't forget anything later on, but I think these are some of the bigger ones. They're like actual bigger points of like, okay, here's like how we're designing it. Okay. But so now the a big consideration is, so I was kind of avoiding this, honestly, like, while I was reading the paper, but because I was like, okay, I don't know if we're going to need a reference survey, but again, we do. I'll say it. And so the thing I was avoiding is I'm trying to think how to organize this best, but maybe just put this at the bottom. Well, no, okay. Sorry, okay. And then I'll maybe throw this up earlier. It doesn't matter, just for my own sake, readability. Okay, cool, sweet, awesome. The thought that I have, hopefully that clap wasn't loud, I apologize. How can I do a good reference survey? This is the problem. Because again, this gets back to, okay, like now I actually do need to somehow guarantee that, I still like choose a random sample from these organizations at these different strata. It's just a smaller random sample. But one second, I'm gonna kind of, this is a big problem. Tab. Just copy that. Sorry. Okay. Okay. The thing that we were talking about right now. How the heck, as is the title of the stream, do I get people like make, like, or I'll say ensure, a little, more polite maybe. How do I ensure people respond to even to survey, I guess, even like in a small population, even if it's a small group of people I'm sending it out to. Okay. I'll just go ahead and do a little all that, because now this is I think the crux of the issue we're dealing with now. How the heck do I? How the heck do I? Okay. Because again, the important thing is that it has to be random. Like, it can't be a thing where like I reach out ahead of time and like, would you be willing to fill out the survey? And then who says yes, then that's my sample size. That's like my small sample size, and then I excluded the ones who just ignored me or said no. And then I'll just my reference survey on the smaller one, right? Because it's like no, like that's not accounting for stratification, like or your self-selection, like that is based on self-selection. And therefore any bias that might have been there is not baked into my benchmark, which again completely defeats the purpose of the benchmark. It's like again extremely not the thing to do. Oh man. All right, let's go back to the paper one more time just to see if they do mention anything about the reference survey. They talk about these different organizations. Okay, and then are these different tools. Okay, and again, ignorable non-response, like ensure pretty much everyone. Again, it's like we'll have to look into like what they mean by ignorable non-response. Like how small is small enough? But yeah, I think that's going to be kind of a big question. Which again, hopefully, we can find real fast with this last little bit of time we have. So maybe one kind of cool thing is like, again, taking a larger step back, some just general techniques and patterns that we're finding is that, again, we had this, well, I just deleted it, but you can, in the VOD, you can see whatever, I forget what it was, but we had this kind of more, just very general, we had this very general question about surveys, right? Like, how do you do selection bias generally? And from some of the papers we found, they led us to this more precise, particular technique, like a reference survey. And so kind of we're able to like zoom in and get more precise with the questions we're asking. So now we'll see if they reference survey design. If there's any papers on how to specifically and like how to specifically design a reference survey, how to like try to guarantee basically no non-responses. Let's see. I'll just check these out again. I don't know if these are I'll close these as well. I don't know if these are pertinent. Like, I don't know if this like a design reference survey. Like, I don't know if it's understanding what I mean, but we can just see. And then also from the paper, they do cite these works. So we can also pull those up and see. So Borsch, I apologize for the umlaut, but Borsch, Supan, and Duffy. Okay. Let's go to the references. Okay. So let's just throw that in the old search engine. That's the paper we were reading, but we throw that into university search engine. Okay, what is the paper actually called? Correcting the participation bias in an online survey. Correcting the participation bias in an online survey. I'm not seeing the paper. Seeing like articles. Borsch, Supan. Again, it's the same. Okay, so this is by the same researcher. Seems maybe pertinent, so we'll kind of keep that open. And we're getting closer to time, so I'll just kind of pull up the articles and we can start out next time by diving into those. And then Duffy et al. Okay, again, I'll just throw this guy in, see if that one comes up. Okay, cool. This one does seem to be available. Okay, so we'll have those pulled up. And then again, okay, I don't know why. Again, I doubt this doesn't seem, I don't know. It seems like it just was catching. You know what, here, I'm going to try to do better. It's like reference survey. Make that like one word, because that's, you know, it's like the technique we want. Okay. I'll just close that out. Okay, again, we'll just pull this up. Let's see if it has anything. Okay, I guess this one is coming up again, but I don't know. We'll just scattershot approach and see if any of them are useful to us. So yeah, I'll just finish pulling these up and then we'll call it for today. Whatever. I'll just do it next time. I'll just kind of close out again. Let's take a quick refresh on what we've done today. So, again, just like basically, we just have kind of what I literally said, just summarizing what we've done today. We refined our survey design quite a bit. Again, the paper wasn't like the most useful thing in the world, but it did give us some direction, some ideas, which I'm grateful for. But, some of the bigger things were just from us sitting and thinking through a little bit more. But, whatever. So from the paper, I got the idea to stratify our organizations we'll be sampling from, which will help with scope, while also minimizing, accounting for some variance, right? But that's going to necessitate that we use this technique of a reference survey. And that is where we're at now, basically. that's the progress for today. So, some days, more than other, but more progress than other days. But I don't know. I am happy with our work today. Just chipping away at it. So, thank you again for joining me for today. Let's see. I guess I'll start putting out. I'm going to be out of town this weekend, so I think generally I'd like to do a stream on Saturdays. Maybe a longer stream on Saturdays, because I won't have work on those days. But this week I won't, because I'll be out of town. But just putting that out there that I intend for that to be part of things going forward. And again, I'll just kind of put out there that if this was, if this has been meaningful to you thus far, if it's been helpful to you, enjoyable, interesting, any of those things, it would mean a lot if you would follow the stream, just so that it has a wider reach for people that it can help. Especially in these early days, that means a lot, and that makes a big impact in who's able to actually see and by that have access to what we're working on. As well, I am again putting together a VOD channel. Again, a lot of large numbers. You're probably watching us on that, and if you are similarly, again, subscribing to that, and again, liking a video in particular, if it again has been particularly helpful to you, that similarly means a lot in helping distribute this resource and helping people have access to it. Again, if it's been helpful to you, helping it help other people. But I think that's it for today. So again, thanks for joining me, and I will see y'all tomorrow. Bye.